What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Age of Quarantine. My name is Chris Enriquez. I'm your host this evening. Thanks for spending it with me. I'm really excited about tonight because we have a guest who played in a legendary New York hardcore band called Outburst, who are legendary because they were around doing something that was still very fresh and new in the late 80s that really, I think, you can kind of trace the roots to a lot of bands. I mean, I can't speak for these bands, but I can hear their sound in Turnstile. I can certainly hear their sound resonating in a lot of modern day hardcore bands, and it's no surprise that Riley Gale of Power Trip, rest in peace, was a huge fan, and that Power Trip covered one of their songs, and we'll get into that a little bit. And the band had a very short-lived existence, but they had a big impact locally that somehow got a resurgence later on in the it's very strange because a lot of younger bands coming out now are fans and ended up doing tributes to them. Some bands that have covered them include Higher Power, Wildside, Initiate, Fury, Crime Watch, Search, a bunch of bands. Outskirts, shout out to Darren Manos. I'm referring, of course, to this compilation that our guest, Joe Songco, generously sent my way, and it's really cool. This came out on Blackout Records, which is, of course, the label that they were on, who put out this classic right here. They're really their only true release aside from the demo. But I have so many questions for Joe about how the band got started and why they were so short-lived. And he's got an interesting story to tell because he was involved in a lot of other things that people may not realize. So without further ado, we're going to get Joe Songco on the screen right now, and we're going to talk to him about music, New York City, hardcore, and being Filipino. Sorry, guys. Can't help it. It's very exciting to have another fellow Pinoy on the show. Joe's going to be appearing on the screen momentarily. Yo!
Hey, sorry, I botched that. I was on my laptop.
Hey, no worries, man. How you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for the kind words at the intro. I heard all that.
Awesome. Everybody, welcome to the Filipino Cooking Channel. This is my guest. The St. Vitus Bar channel has been hacked. I apologize to all of you.
Yes, I will say that not in addition to my wife, my sister-in-law out in Seattle is looking for vegan Filipino recipes. So I told them you're the guy. So they may chime in on.
Absolutely. We could talk about that all day, but we're going to talk about you. Last time I had you on the show, we were talking about our mutual friend, Riley Gale from Power Trip, which again, I'm going to say RIP, it comes up a lot. It's still really sad. But the cool thing about having you here is I feel like a lot of times I see you on screen, you're talking about other bands or other things and stuff like that. So this is a great way to sort of isolate into your history. And as we've gotten to know each other through the pandemic, because I've seen you around, and I've seen you around St. Vitus, but I never said what's up. And so it's funny that I know a decent amount about you now. One good thing about the pandemic is people have connected. So
yeah,
super cool. But let's start with this. Where are you from originally in New York? I know it's Queens.
Yeah, so I was I was born in Manhattan, on 49th Street and 8th Avenue, near the Port Authority, but my folks decided to relocate to Queens and Astoria, which is, as you know, it's the luck of geography is that I wound up growing up the same block with all these other, in the same neighborhood where all these other New York hardcore bands are from. So if you don't move to that neighborhood, maybe I don't, maybe they want to go to Jersey or move out of New York, and I wouldn't have met any of my friends,
Right. And there's a lot of people from Astoria. I'm going to try to go down the list off the top of my head, and then you can fill in the blanks. But Kraut is from Astoria.
Yeah.
Leeway is from Astoria. Am I right in saying that most of Token Entry and Killing Time are also Astoria?
Token Entry and Killing Time, because Anthony was in Token Entry, and then he joined Killing Time. But I think the guys in Killing Time and Breakdown, they were from like White Plains. But Anthony Astoria or Astoria, like Jackson Heights, like they're like neighbors, you know, and like in Brooklyn you have all these little neighborhoods that like you cross the street and you're in another place.
Right. It's so weird. It really is. I feel like a lot of areas in Queens and Brooklyn are like that, where you're just like, you can like. I used to hang out a lot in a certain part of Bushwick where if you just walked across the street, you would be in Ridgewood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like that. I always feel like that in Flatbush when you're, you know, sort of like by Atlantic Avenue. But excuse me.
Yeah. Lou is in Astoria. Lou is in the chat, and he was saying New York Hood's an abomination.
Oh wow, interesting. I didn't know that New York Hoods, because Gavin Van Black from Absolution was an original member of New York Hoods. He's not from Astoria, but I know there's a lot of Astoria people.
Yeah.
And there's more. I mean, I guess you could throw in Gilligan's Revenge if we're going to go even that deep into that, and of course Walter. But let me ask you this: I've heard this question asked a ton on these hardcore podcasts and interviews, where they go, "Why do you think so many people are from this area or that area?" And I'm going to go very like specifically to Astoria and ask you, what about Astoria? Because even to this day, Astoria Soundworks exists, and you can go there and see hardcore bands, both young and new. Why do you think Astoria breeds so much New York hardcore?
I'm gonna say, like, at least for the bands that we grew up kind of getting influence from, like, you know, like you said, Crowd, Murphy's Law, you know, all the elders. It's weird, they're not that much older than us, but I in the water. If you ever read Tony Retman's New York hardcore book that came out like maybe in 2014,
right.
Somebody, I forget who it was, made a contribution about saying there was something in the water in Queens. I just think you had, like, you know, and just to spread it out a little bit, Queens also, you could do like Rest in Peace and Sick of It All, you know, Bad Trip.
Right.
They're not from Astoria originally, but that's still Queens, right? If anyone who knows NYC.
Well, yeah, Queens was a huge breeding ground for all over the place. I mean, I always wonder though, like, you know, kind of everyone's story is different. I mean, the Lower East Side story tales are always spoken about. You know, those are the most exposed when it comes to New York hardcore. But Queens in particular, did you feel like? Because I felt like for me in Long Island, being bullied and being an outcast is what drove me to it. But did you feel like you got fucked with a lot? Maybe that's why a lot of people ended up involved with angry, aggressive music.
You know, personally speaking, it all started like there wasn't a lot of bullying going on, at least where we were. But like the high school that I went to, St. John's Prep, that had you know, AJ from Leeway was there, Anthony Comunale from, you know, Gilligan's Revenge, Token Entry. You know, we had all these people who were into the music. We hung out on the corner on Ditmars Boulevard.
Ditmars Boulevard, man, damn.
Yeah, you guys like the Gorilla Biscuits, like Walter and Arthur went to like LIC and McClancy, not too far away, and then the Token Entry guys, you know, Ernie and Johnny and those guys, they were all like meeting in Astoria and hanging out. So it was kind of a sense of community. There wasn't like, and I don't think anybody was getting bullied. Maybe they were made fun of because they looked different, or like Comunale had like safety pins in his jacket, and AJ had a denim leather with like Power Trip, this Italian band Power Trip, not the Dallas, Texas one, on his back.
Right.
Looked the part of the Outcasts, or, you know, you didn't look like you were into like freestyle music.
Yeah.
You know, so you did look like an outsider. But when you get together, especially in Astoria, it was more of a sense of community. So I can't really attest to bullying being the driving factor of like, well, this is what draws me to it. It was more really like the music and the community.
Sure, yeah, really. Well, and you know what's cool is that the breeding ground over there, it spawned a lot of different styles of punk and hardcore, because it's not like all of these bands even sound alike. You know, they really don't. You know, like Leeway sounds nothing like Killing Time, and they sound nothing like Token Entry, and Outburst sounds very much on their own. Although there's the thing I love so much about New York hardcore specifically is that as a drummer, I'm going to tie it in here because you are a drummer, that hip hop is the backbone of New York hardcore, and you cannot say that about West Coast hardcore, and you can't say that about Washington D.C. hardcore. And the best drummers in hardcore are right here in New York City. That is a fact.
It takes one to know one. It takes a Filipino drummer to know one also.
I get stoked about whenever I think about you or Pokey being other Asian dudes that came before that were representing, man. He's a great interview as well. So when did you start playing drums, and how did that even happen?
So I'm going to tie this into the Filipino thing, because I guess being from a Filipino family, and I'm not just sure it's specific to Filipinos, but they're very musical people. They're very like,
right.
They like to sing and perform. And so
right.
Anyone out there who knows this, I'm right. My mom wanted me to, at an early age, be involved in music. So she kind of like railroaded me into piano lessons. And, I wasn't really a willing participant. I was like, sure, whatever, I'm 9, I'll do whatever. I didn't really think about how miserable I was going to be, but I was actually decent at it for 4 or 5 years. I was winning these competitions just because you're parroting like a piece of music for like 3 months, and then you play it in front of a judge and you can get it. I'm a really good mimic. So I won like medals playing in piano competitions, but I wasn't really happy. I started and then I begged my folks for a keyboard, like a synthesizer. It was a Korg Poly 800, because this was like 1984 or 5, and I wanted to play Jump. I
knew you were gonna fucking bring it there, man.
I wanted to play,
yeah.
There's Eddie's guitar right back there on the wall.
Yeah.
And when he went to I don't know why I didn't pick up guitar, because I was such a fan of the band, but when he started playing Jump and I'll Wait and, getting into keyboards, I was like, I want to do that. I think I could do that. So my folks shelled out the money. And then as I played, this is a funny story. And if anyone on the block is listening, on the block, there were drummers and guitarists already who loved like metal. And they wanted to play like Dio, Rainbow in the Dark.
Right.
Michael Schenker groups On and On, which have keyboard parts. So I was sitting there with my little keyboard playing these little parts, and there's the drummers like Sasso, the original drummer from Leeway, and this guy Fotti, who lived down the block, in their basements jamming to like George, my guitarist George, and AJ, and Nick Benadas. They all from Cold Front. They all went into these hardcore bands, but we were all just covering metal songs in the beginning, and I wasn't really happy because I'm not going to play like 30 seconds of Rainbow in the Dark and then I'm done. That's my participation. So.
Oh yeah, that's fucking hilarious. And there was a lot of that kind of thing happening at that time.
Yeah. So I actually changed my mind again, and I asked my folks if they could give me a loan for a drum set. I don't know why I picked drums instead of guitar or bass or but I'm glad I did. My folks got me a Tama 5-piece, and they went all out. They got me like Pasty and Zildjian hardware too, and I was like, wow. I
got lucky. You got some good shit right out of the gate.
Yeah, I was really lucky. So thanks, Mom and Dad. And then I started learning from Sasso Matroni, the original. He's on the Leeway Enforcer demo. He lived up, and watching Leeway take shape, watching the stuff he does. Johnny Kahns from Crowd, Ernie from Token Entry. Those are the guys that you would see like at the club or in someone's basement playing. And I was like, that's what you do, everyone has their influences. I'm sure you could name a couple of guys. You're like, at a young age, you kind of like made an impression on you, like, oh, I want to do that. So that's how. That's
very interesting. It's a local dude that it's not even so much the band that you're covering. It's like it's the guy that maybe was older than you or friends with you that was covering this song that you saw playing. I can relate to that completely. I think that's kind of where you're going.
Yeah, and you're like, I'm not trying to ape them, but I want to like kind of see if I can do what they're doing. And I mean, to this day, like if you listen to the beginning of, the Crowd song NGRI or something like that, or even some of the stuff that Sasso pulls on the Leeway Enforcer demo, I could still never do that. But that's how you get your chops, right? You get to learn how to like.
It's your tribe, man. Yeah.
Fill, and then maybe you get adventurous and try another fill, and that's how that worked out. So.
And then so I guess this kind of answers my question, but you just explained how you ended up playing drums, and that really happened at the same time as your homies
Yeah.
getting so hard. Like, do you remember the first time punk and hardcore really like even entered your life, and you were like, "Oh, this is a thing, and I guess I'm going to be a part of this. This is what's going on."
Uh, like culture-wise, I remember being in grade school and like hearing like Blondie, The Police, Talking Heads, being associated with this club called CBGB downtown. And
Uh-huh.
when you're like whatever it is, 12, you don't even know what that is. You just hear it on the radio, or see it in the newspaper. Like, wow, that's in a whole nother world.
Right.
Um, so that's when I knew that it existed and that there was a punk culture. But like Blondie and Police and Talking Heads, they're like radio friendly, like punk, under the punk umbrella. But as far as like the raunchier stuff, like Ramones,
Right.
um,
Right.
the Clash, I heard like Train in Vain on the radio one day. That made the local radio station. Ramones, you could hear like I Want to Be Sedated, and to me that was
Yeah.
punk,
And
right?
it's easy. It makes you feel like you can do it
Yeah, and
when you listen to the music.
yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
like you can't just start playing some of the bands you mentioned. They're like, even though they came from the same scene, they were like almost like too good at their instruments. But when you hear the Ramones, you're like, I can totally do that.
right, like
Yeah.
like some of Sting's early Police bass lines.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's punk, but I guess it was kind of aggressive and beat driven. I mean, Stuart Copeland's amazing,
Exactly. Yeah.
but it wasn't like raw, like the punk you associate with like safety pins through your nose and like Doc Martens and stuff, but it was in that kind of in that universe. So
Okay, so and then all your friends are getting into it at the same time. Now, when you told me something last week, I want you to tell a story first, but before Outburst even became a band, you were jamming with your friends. Talk about that and like how like sort of like all of these bands sort of came out of that. That's kind of what I think I got from what you were telling me when we were just sort of
yeah.
off the record talking about stuff.
So I'll even pull it back a little bit further since we're going to the beginning. But on our block, okay, so like it's 3-4 block radius, in 14th Street and Astoria Park South and the surrounding 3 blocks, you had a pack of like 12, 13 kids. I'll just give you the roster of who we grew up with, walked around with, drank beers with in the park, and listened to the radio. This is George Rico, who was in Outburst with me, a high school classmate. A.G. Novello from Leeway.
Yes.
Tasso Matroni from went on to be in Leeway. Around the corner, you had Nick Benados, who went to be in Cold Front. Mike DeJean, everyone knows Mike, lived a couple blocks.
He's one of the best. Yeah.
I can't even name all the bands he's been in. That it was
I
Breakdown.
mean, I probably would miss a few.
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna try. Yeah.
Crown of Thorns, Breakdown to be most.
We had like the pop groups. Anyway, yeah.
yeah. Lavalette. And then Nick Benados' younger brother, Chris Benados, he went on to be in Fit of Anger and Everybody Gets Hurt.
Wow. Okay. Shout out to Jessica Pimentel.
Yeah, I mean they got pretty big.
Yeah.
That was our neighboring area. Then across the park, you had the guys from New York Hoods and Crowd, and they would, Doug Holland, who was in Crowd, went on to be in Cro-Mags. So we would. Mm-hmm. This would be like any given night in the summertime on the park bench, and of course you get together and hang out. Like, hey, what do you play? What do you want to get together and try some songs? And maybe we'll jam. So when I got my kit, we weren't a band yet. This was probably like 80, 85 maybe. And
that's early on. We're almost right after the first wave, kind of.
Yeah. And so we would, like Crowd would still be playing around and Murphy's Law. We tried to book a studio at Roxy's in Long Island City to play some SOD covers. Think about that.
Okay.
I tried to learn like Pussy Whipped and Speak English or Die and Freddy Krueger. That was my experience in like playing fast.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. That's where you got your style from when it came to sort of, yeah.
Yeah. Like Charlie Bonante was playing on that thing. I had to try to learn. Can you imagine that? Like trying to pick up Charlie's like speed and everything.
He is incredible. Yeah.
He doesn't get enough credit.
And when you're doing this, so many bands are being born out of your crew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously, like, well, I got the drums in my basement, and this was probably around '86 now, where George and I started playing like metal covers. I'll just name a few, and you might know a bunch of them. Nuclear Assault, like Betrayal, or Exodus, Piranha.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, DRIs.
Well, also, it's cool that Nuclear Assault is technically a local band, which is the best part of that band. Is like they're like hometown heroes.
Oh man, are you big into Nuclear Assault? I love them.
I discovered them in the Super Bowl of Hardcore VHS in the '90s, but they didn't play; they were just talking.
Yeah,
and then I got into their music then, and then the first time I saw them was actually at St. Vitus within the past few years. So I didn't get to see them back in the day, but I am a fan.
Yeah, their demo was like religion for us. We had to put it in the tape deck because it was sort of like their image was sort of metal, and they could like pal around with Anthrax, but if you listen to them, they could play CBGBs. They, Lilliker was in SOD with his, DRI and Circle Jerks pad. Like there was a big crossover feel going on at that time.
Yeah, for sure, definitely, and especially in your guys, what you guys were doing, because you took hardcore punk rock, then you took that like hip hop backbeat and gave it some of that flavor, and then there was like the crossover is what I think the specialty was of what you guys produced. All of you, Leeway, Outburst, specifically. I'll focus on those two bands because the guitar solos and a lot of Bad Brains too.
Oh yeah, Bad Brains were big. The yellow tape, and even up to Eye Against Eye was like, you knew every song on that record backwards and forwards.
Well, yeah, you guys covered it.
Yeah. Nobody knows this, and I still don't know why we didn't get like a cease and desist, but we did. She's Calling You, instrumental, which made it onto Spotify, and nobody. It's all thanks to Bill Wilson for calling it Untitled because it's there to this day. But that's Bad Brains. She's Calling You, basically.
So then, at what point does Outburst happen exactly, and how does that sort of like officially come out of this?
So I'm still in the one foot into the question. The last question is that it's like Enforcer demo, Sasso leaves Leeway. So it's between Sasso and Mackie coming in and filling in, and then Jose, the bassist, is kind of like not working out. But he's making mistakes during shows. Like he's not keeping up with AJ, who, if you know AJ, he's like super like militant. Like you got to have it his right. So one day he asked me, he's like, "You got your kit set up? Let me bring my amp down to your garage. Let's work out Jose. You know all the songs anyway." I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, you want me to play like jam out with you guys?" And so there I am playing all these Leeway songs, which I've come from like sitting there watching them being born, watching Sasso rip them up, to actually playing Sasso's parts.
And all they have is a demo out at this point.
And the demo, and then they had a lot of songs that made it onto Born to Expire, which were not on any kind of wax yet. They were kind of fully formed. So I'm jamming. I'm learning. It's helping my chops too. And we're playing it like this is like 2 hours of just playing Leeway songs, nothing but Leeway songs.
That's crazy.
And this I know because I remember there's on Spotify, if you look at, I think it was Born to Expire, the bonus tracks is a Rich show from like December '86. And I think that's Jose's last show, either his last show or his next to last show. And he's pretty high up in the PA. You can hear him a lot.
Yeah.
And that's the result of him playing that well was because like AJ said, "Hey, help me work this guy out." And he needs to keep his time better. So that was a direct result. Like we jammed in like, November or early December, and then he's playing the Ritz.
That's insane, right? That's a huge jump, and like the Ritz at the time was probably like playing Madison Square Garden for you guys, I would imagine.
Right? Yeah. To see our friends up on stage, like just maybe like earlier, like a year or two earlier, we're watching Cro-Mags and 7 Seconds and Motorhead, and there's your friend who you walked to high school with up on that same stage. It's pretty wild.
Did you ever make it to shows with Leeway, or it never got to that point?
No. So that was like the first Leeway dalliance. right? And then George and I started getting into now it's senior year of high school. So he's writing songs. We're getting like Brian and Chris and Jay. We're trying to form our own band. And Leeway, they got Mackie. So Leeway's the chronology kind of like parallel is that Leeway got Mackie, then they got Tony to play on Born to Expire. They filled out to do the record, and we were already Outburst already formed. We did our demo, and we did the comp tracks, and then somewhere this is now like 88, maybe 89. AJ and George shared a Marshall stack, so they kept it in his basement or my garage. So at this time, it was in my garage, and AJ said, "I got a bunch of songs, a bunch of riffs that I'm, what are you doing right now? Let's go jam." And for me and AJ, it's funny. I'm all over the place, but you know how he's playing in Cro-Mags now, or Cro-Mags JM?
Yeah, right.
This is way back in the beginning. He and I would play the whole Age of Quarrel record back to forward.
Okay.
Every song. We wouldn't even have to let's do this next. We would do the order.
Right.
Drill. But during one of those sessions where we were doing that, we moved from like playing Cro-Mags covers, which he does now with them, to riffs of like that made it onto like Desperate Measures.
Unreal, man. I mean, you can hear the influence.
Yeah, he was like, put a beat to this, and this is like I think Pookie was trying out, or he had maybe not even joined the band yet. He just had these riffs to put on. He wanted to put it on tape deck. He had this like really shitty like Sanyo like boombox, and I remember because everyone had that. You knew whose boombox was whose, right, back in the day.
Right.
And he would be recording these like, I want to record the riffs that became like the opening to All About Dope or Stand For, which to me Stand For. When I first heard it, I was like, that doesn't sound very Leeway-ish. It's kind of like very melodic.
Right.
AJ was growing as a songwriter. Riffs from No Heroes, The Future, Soft Way Out, the whole thing. Maybe like 95% of Soft Way Out was in my basement. That he would just tell me how he wanted it played, and I would do it. He was recording it. I should have like swept those tapes, man. Just to prove that I had.
There's nothing like I guess I'm assuming you said basement. I mean, because Queens has houses, and it's a little different than the rest of like Manhattan per se. For anyone watching that doesn't know, so like it's nothing replaced those days of being in your parents' house and jam with your friends in the basement where you just sit there for hours. You have all the time of day to just fucking be creative, and so then we talked about that a lot, but Outburst we kind of just sort of like mentioned comes out of that, but not really getting into the specifics of that.
Yeah. So we're if I'm gonna go to the beginning, like while this Leeway thing is happening and they're like getting bigger, we're like let's try and do that. Let's go to Don Fury where you went to do a demo. In fact, this is the connection is that George for the longest time he bought AJ's Gibson SG, and that's how we learned to play guitar. George got lessons from AJ. I mean, literally, they were like 100 yards from house to house. So they all grew up playing football, and they walk into high school together. That's the kind of block it was. So for AJ to sell George his guitar so we could buy a Kramer, that was just how you did. And
right. What an influence he was on everybody, because I know Dijon said he was such a big mentor of a guitar player for him too. So interesting to hear the connections to everybody through him.
Yeah, and he was also the guy. To go back to your question about punk and hardcore, like early like existence of it, he would bring the records back from Bleecker Bob's and sounds. He would bring us Dead Kennedys and Zero Boys and Circle Jerks, and we would borrow them and record them for ourselves and listen to them. He also brought metal like Accept and Metallica.
Says a lot too. That and that goes into the crossover stuff, because you get the speed. Not that those bands like Metallica didn't have speed, but just the culmination of the two is what I kind of hear coming out of the sounds like that of your band and Leeway and a lot of the things. What Cro-Mags became, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Even what AF became.
Yeah, for like Eliminator, like the Cause for Alarm.
Yep.
But I think George, the chief songwriter, he was really more of a Black Sabbath kind of guy. So he was like a Tony Iommi like disciple. He loves Randy Rhoads too. He likes all that Black Sabbath Ozzy like avenue. That's his lane.
I mean, you can't go wrong. I mean, that's
going to
the that's the Bible right there.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
but Metallica, Slayer, Corrosion of Conformity, DRI, Crumbsuckers, those were all like, you know, regularly spun at this point. So now we're not talking about Clash and Ramones anymore. We're talking about the bands I just mentioned,
Right.
you know, which are like the influences we're playing. We're trying to sound like we're getting, you know, we're all writing riffs and stuff like that. So this is now what influenced the songwriting for the Outburst demo, I want to say, 87. That's crazy to say that. Yeah, that's so long ago.
Oh, I know. Don't even trip, man. It's like the same shit I've been thinking about too. Like someone says 20 years ago is like 2001, and I'm just like, God damn. Because in 2000, if you said that, then you were talking about like the Doors or something. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah,
like shit
right.
like that. When you like think about it, it's so fucked up.
And you're like, I know Might Have Princess came out in 2000, right? Or 2001? Like that was
90, 97 to 2003.
okay. That was your first your
Yeah. So we were in the 90s. So still like kind of like a little bit in the time frame of like, touring with maps and no cell phones and that whole thing,
map quest.
and like MapQuest and all that shit. So yeah, it's so interesting to think about. But yeah, like fucking the stuff that you said you were spinning and like kind of coming out of makes a lot of sense because your sound is very much like, again, just a culmination of all those things. So then you put out a demo in '87, which is shortly after you're playing with Leeway. You put that together, and
Yeah.
then how did you feel the band was sort of like fitting into the scene at that point and sort of getting involved CBs and getting on these cool shows, because the scene was kind of like blown up at that point.
Yeah, it was popping, and like around that time, everybody who wanted to try their hand at the scene would do a demo, and they would go to Don Fury. Like, you know who gets a lot of who doesn't get a lot of mention? Crackdown. They're from Long Island.
Oh yeah, I know Richie. But Richie was the bartender at my local bar.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, Richie,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Damon and Jason. Crackdown they played a lot, and we became friends with them. Anthony was always around. So around the time we dropped our demo, like Token Entry already had a record. I think Gorilla Biscuits already had a demo. Crackdown had a demo. So we were kind of like, we'd meet them out front of some records, trying to sell Dwayne like a box of 20, and
Right.
who's there any day? Oh, it's the guys from Crackdown. It's Walter. It's Ray Capo. They're all hanging out. So you get to talk shop a little bit with these people outside of some records, and also buy the new demo tape. And Dwayne was great at, like, anyone who remembers some records, they would be like, "Oh, I just got these in," and he'd be playing them in the store, and he's like, "Here you go, pick it right up, $5. You'll take it home. You won't regret it." And then around the corner was See Here, the fanzine store, where you could buy.
That's crazy just to say fanzine store, by the way.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
it's really nuts. Yeah.
I don't know whatever but you could literally buy like Maximum Rock and Roll, and then Bullshit Monthly was like handwritten with like staples in it, in effect.
Yeah.
And all the other like Flip Side, you could go there. And so it was a great hub, that 1 or 2 block radius where everybody gravitated to. We started like hanging out there, and then we still also knew the guys from like the block, like AJ and Leeway, and on Pizza Palace corner, which is Ditmars Boulevard again, you could meet like the guys from New York Hoods to hang out. Oh, what are you doing now? Oh, we're gonna write a song about this. We're gonna do a demo. We're talking to Revelation Records. Just chatted like that,
Yeah.
So that's how we kind of got into the club, I guess. But it was convenient because we were friends with a lot of those people as the ascension happened for them. We sort of like at the tail end of that too. Like, hey, we know you. Let's maybe get some shows together.
Did you do any touring at that point, or much at all, like through the band's sort of, because I know that like a lot of New York hardcore bands, not just Outburst, for example, like Burn, just started playing other countries and on the West Coast within the past 5-10 years, and like so did a lot of other like I'm trying to think, like probably Bowls, I'm gonna imagine, probably like didn't go to Europe back in the day. Like so like how active were you outside of New York at this time?
Outside of New York was like a show in Connecticut was considered like a road trip, like an adventure,
Right. Sure.
because a bunch of us were in college, so we've got to like, you know, pay all this money for tuition. I'm not going to blow it off. Like, I think like Walter Shrivels was telling a story on one of his earlier shows, like his van show, that Ray asked him to join Youth of Today, and he had just enrolled. I don't know if it was Hunter College, and he was like, "Look, this is a once in a lifetime chance. I don't know. There's like a September or something. Like, you drop out, you go on the road with us, or you don't drop out, and I'm gonna go look for another bass player." Like, it's that kind of the opportunity, seize the opportunity. But we didn't have a lot of that because touring to us just meant road trips. Like we had cars, we can go down to DC or Virginia or up to like and Philly. But for someone to say like, now it's so easy to like a promoter will be like, I'll pay you this much if you get on a plane. I'll pay your airfare. You'll get.
It's so different. Even like just talking about some records, like you have to, and I don't want to like sound like the old guys, but we're talking and reminiscing, and I'm a little bit younger, and I experienced a little bit of what you're talking about. But even more so, you have to go to that place to get the records instead of just streaming stuff. So it actually forces you to socialize and be around human beings to get that shit and get over your fear of going to a stranger and pitching your band and saying, I have a demo, will you carry it? All that stuff. And then maybe somebody hears you that's in the room, and there's just a human interaction that's taking place.
Yeah. And then
yeah,
I heard you're playing the Anthrax in Connecticut. Is the bill filled up? Can we still get on that? Or they'll be like, oh, what are you doing? Let's go play the Safari Club down in DC. Are you free? It was a lot of word of mouth before it was texting or message boards, things like that. You would pick up the phone and call somebody, or like you said, just you're standing around talking about music. And it was a cool, now that I reminisce back on it, like that, there was like it's like a feeling you can't recreate or describe. It just had to be there,
It's such a bummer when I think about it that way, because I feel like the 90s when I started going to CBs and experiencing Coney Island High and Wetlands is also in an interesting sort of light of like, you're going into the city, you're going to this club, it's still underground, you're meeting people that become lifelong friends without knowing it, and you might get hurt, but you're not sure, exactly, like all this stuff, but so then Outburst ends up being on this compilation that Freddie Alva put together. Speaking of community, can you like talk about that and maybe just mention the comp and the bands that were on it and how that helped shape kind of its own little community that was an offshoot of what you're maybe growing up in Astoria was? It expanded a little bit.
Oh yeah. That was, so I'll just preface it with this. Around the time, like there were certain bands that were a little bit ahead of us, were getting interest from labels. And the big thing back then was to get your music like in some kind of, you've done a demo. Now, what are you going to do? 7-inch? Are you going to do, get a 12, record deal? Like In Effect just came around, and they were signing like, Killing Time. I'm jumping ahead, but all the bands that were doing demos, Freddie
Wait,
Alva.
can I ask you really quickly, just not to interrupt, but In Effect, was it still Chris, who's running the company now, that was doing it back then?
Oh, In Effect Records was different from In Effect Fanzine. Chris Wynn from Whitestone. He grew up in Whitestone.
Oh, so it's two different. I didn't know that there was two different things.
Yeah,
got it. Okay.
In Effect, like 24/7 Spies, and I think they went on to do the first. They did Brightside by Killing Time. That was a label funded by Relativity, I want to say.
Okay, got it. Sorry, thanks for clarifying. I wasn't sure if it was the same thing, but
yeah, they did words. They had the same title. But Freddie Alva, who's from Jackson Heights, Queens, shout out to Freddie. He was a total DIY guy. He would meet you at shows and outside of CBs and like, hey, you guys want to be on this tape compilation I'm putting together? And I don't know if you've seen the compilation that the documentary that him and Chaka.
I did. I fucking love it. It's fucking rad because I really like that compilation too, because it had kind of like ushered in a different type of. You have Youth Crew. Okay, like we'll try to skip through everything, but like when you get into that era, there's crossover. There's Youth Crew, but then there's like what I like to kind of call like urban core, and that to me was like urban core. Like I might have just made that term up, but you know, it just had a sound like not like there's something about that comp with I think with the graffiti and like the aesthetics and the way that the band sounded that to me was just very urban in a different way than my other was. Yeah.
It also had like you had your like Breakdown and Killing Timer on it. They were still Raw Deal at the time, but then you had like Collapse and Bad Trip.
Right,
you know,
right.
and you know, the bands that who had just done their demo and now they're getting a chance to write a new song or a couple of songs and showcase themselves again. And I think I want to say there's like 18 bands on that, like 36
What was
songs.
the name of the comp again? I'm ashamed right now that
The New Breed tape.
The New Breed comp.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah. There's
So,
that cool. The documentary came out over the pandemic and not too long ago.
Yeah.
So people should go check it out. Yeah.
It's and that's Chaka on the steps of the cover of the cassette, and
on some records. Yeah.
Gavin's on there with Absolution, Gingy. It's a really good collective of. It wasn't just Revelation bands. It wasn't just Blackout bands. They all came together. I've seen it on message boards in the past. It's one of the holy trinity of New York compilations because I guess the Revelation, Blackout, and then Freddy's, which is total DIY.
I think it is too. I mean, New York hardcore, the way it is, had a lot of cool stuff because it covered, you know, everything from Warzone to Youth of Today and Nausea. But that comp that you're talking about has some key elements, not to mention just Outburst, but I mean, Absolution is a band that I think that is so criminally underrated and not talked about enough. It's just crazy. Yeah.
And also for trivia, thanks to Lou again in the chat. The band Show of Force, that was Mike DeJohn's first band.
When did Mike DeJohn end up in Outburst? I always wondered that. Was he part of that? Because he wasn't on, and forgive me if I'm mistaken, but he wasn't on the recordings.
No. So the story of Mike DeJohn is when our original bassist, he sucked anyway. Sorry, he just wasn't a good player. But we all were good when we started, right? We had to work at your craft. And then our first show at CB's, he had like a family trip, and he was gonna blow this chance to play CB's to go on a family trip, which, you know, you get older, you understand, like, you know, commitments and stuff like that. So we needed a bass player because we already got this gig at CB's, our first one. And so we were trying out, like, you know, DeJohn had just picked up his instrument, and he was more of a guitarist, but he was ready to step in. And we also Walter, who was in Warzone, Gorilla Biscuits, you know, Youth of Today. He was also like, you know, I'm around if you want me to learn your songs. And so we're like, all right, let's just do it, you know. So we wound up going with Walter to fill in that one show at CB's, and he never lets us forget it. Like, yeah, I was a member of your band. You know, it's kind of little known.
Right.
But then we got Mike Wells into the band as bassist. Fast forward to like the mid 2000s, we did a show at CBGB's with Jay. So Jay was our OG founding member, other guitarist, who's also Filipino, by the way. But then he didn't want to really, like, you know, some people are just out of things, like they're over it and they don't want to go on, like, reunions don't interest them. You know, they just want to leave the past in the past. That's kind of what
There's a lot of that, yeah. And some things are better left a certain way, but I do love when people come back and it's good, it's fucking awesome. And Outburst coming back was very important. We'll get to that.
Well, so that's a great segue into DeJohn because, you know, there was Mike been with us from day one on the block. And, you know, even though he's got all these other bands going on, he's still, like, you know, our friend from the block. So we approached him if he wanted to play the 2012 Black and Blue Bowl, and he was all about it. He's like, yeah, let's do it, man. And he goes on to say in the documentary, that little Blackout Records documentary we have, that it was a validating thing because he felt like all these years later, he finally passed the audition, that's
so funny, man.
It's tongue-in-cheek. Mike is an amazing player. So,
he's one of the best in the entire scene, for sure.
He really is. And so, like, for him to say, it's tongue-in-cheek, I think it was, that he passed the audition. Like, he knew those songs backwards and forwards since, like, 1988. So I thought that was a little funny that he said that. But he joined the band, and, you know, he's been second guitar ever since.
I want to talk about, like, the resurgence of the band, but I want to still stick with Miles to Go because we didn't really talk about it too much. But you did the record with Don Fury, right? Am I correct?
The demo was Don Fury, and then Bill Wilson from Blackout wanted to do Legend Studios out in East Setauket.
Okay. Oh, Long Island. Okay.
Because he had heard Rest in Pieces do My Rage in Legend Studio, and he loved the sound. So he's like, of course, he's like, I'm paying for it. I'll send you there. And we're like, yeah, cool, whatever. Even back then, like going to the LIE was a big adventure for us, a bunch of dopes from Brooklyn and Queens. So that was kind of,
it's so funny. I mean, just going the opposite, going into the city.
Yeah.
Even for me, I was really close to Queens because I was out western Long Island, like Nassau County border. My train line was, a couple stops away from Flushing, so I was right there. But like even just going into Manhattan to play a show, just like you're saying, recording in Long Island felt like you were entering a different world.
And you're only, an hour from point A to point B is maybe an hour and a half, and you feel like you're in a completely different place. But I wanted to ask you, where in Long Island are you from originally?
Manhasset.
Oh, wow. That's,
yeah. Sorry?
That North Shore? Like
that's a North Shore, yeah. So I mean, I was like on the Flushing train line, the Port Washington train line.
Like Great Neck.
Great Neck, and then I spent a lot of time in Douglaston, Bayside, and Flushing growing up, and I went to school with a lot of people from there. So it was kind of like fun realizing that like everyone else in Long Island that was like further out than me definitely did not get into the city as quick, and also probably weren't surrounded by as many Queens kids as I was. So I kind of like identified with both sides because of my geography.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Pocket was where we did Miles to Go, and the 2 tracks from the Blackout compilation, where the Wild. Actually, I just happen to have it here. There's the.
Oh, nice! You have the original one. I'm gonna bust out the tribute one in a little bit. That's an original. There's
Paul from Sheer Terror.
Yes.
And
you were on some iconic compilations.
Yeah, that's all Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson had the vision to like get a compilation after the Revelation one. He was just like, what should I do? Let me try the compilation. So that actually preceded Miles to Go, and that had Raw Deal on it, Uppercut, Gorilla Biscuits are on there. Yeah. Sheer Terror is on there. So that was a pretty dope comp to be on. And he put the Hard Way first. So that kind of like
the Hard Way is a fucking classic. And that being on the compilation was a really good selection. I think that that Miles to Go for me is such a cool record because in this like weird way, a lot of those like old recordings that bands put out were technically maybe they're really raw and not the best. I really liked the recording, and I'm gonna make a very strange pivot. It reminds me of like the Inside Out recording a little bit, even though it was a totally different studio and a different place. Everything sounds good and it's audible and it's not like a total mess. And the performances on there are great. And I have a theory of why I think there was a resurgence, which I'll talk about in a little bit because we'll get there.
Oh yeah.
But when the album came out, how like talk about the time period that you were out sort of doing your thing and then like why the band broke up, because it feels like now looking back now with all these bands and jockeying Outburst today, that the band probably could have gotten way bigger had you wanted to pursue it, but you didn't really make it to that next level.
I think looking back at the quirkiness of that whole like short-lived shelf life but long-lasting impact, that's just nuts to me. But it sort of like adds to the mystique, I guess. I don't know, for lack of a better word.
It's true.
There's something mysterious about it. Like what happened to those guys? But we did the record. We did actually do some shows to promote it, and then like George is working and going to school. I'm doing the same thing, and it's becoming a lot because when I look back on it now, there was a time I would always say like I've got to get up to go to school, do these college classes. I have to do work study.
Are you a teenager at this point?
Yeah, like I would say like maybe junior, maybe early, maybe 19, 20.
All right, so you can't even really like kind of look at. I mean, you were basically a little kid in a weird way. I mean, you're an adult, but you're a kid.
Yeah, you're maturing, like learning how like real life works, and like
Right.
I've got papers to write. I've got I don't want to like drop below my GPA. Um, then trying to find room for a band, right? Which you know, as you know, you got to rehearse. You got to get tight. If you're playing a show, you got to rehearse and write more songs. And so it's becoming a little much. So like we all had a feeling that like and back then, like let's use 1990 as a frame. We didn't know that like Sick of It All was going to go on for 30 plus years. you know,
Right. No
and that
one knew that this was going to become professional.
yeah, and that that like if there's like a timeline, like Leeway lasted another 4 years. GB had the one record Start Today, and then Quicksand happened, and they were done. Like nobody knew
Right.
how it was going to turn out, even though everyone plays reunion shows now, which is it's awesome. But the timeline of like your continuity, we had one of the shortest continuities,
Well, there's a lot. There's two things. There's 2 points to that are true. Number one, the short-lived existence with long-lasting impact is common. There's a lot of that. I mean, just like you said, Gorilla Biscuits had one EP and an LP, and they still are huge. I mean, they headlined over Agnostic Front on the Persistence tour overseas.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second, and then you can even go. I'm going to make a weird pivot and say that the band, even though it's not hardcore, Texas is the Reason has one album out and one EP, and that's it. And they and every time they play, they headline Irving Plaza, and it's sold out. And they tour.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird New York thing, I think, in a weird way.
I agree with that 100%. It's when Quicksand came back like a couple years ago, they immediately went on Jimmy Fallon, right? Like,
oh yeah, how fucking wild is that?
And they were.
You could go in a million different directions because I mean, look, like you just said, Leeway lasted a couple more years, and they did end up on MTV before they broke up.
Yeah.
Not playing live, but with the music video. So, I could go on and on about that because I do think there's a reason why New York is such a weird blessing and a curse, and it's because like bands from here have gotten bigger than any other band in hardcore period, but they've also like broken up. Like the bands here break up and there's always drama all the time. But I think it's because we, in our inherent nature as New Yorkers, want to be on top, right? We're always like wanting, and we're competitive by nature. But then it can get to the best of us, and that's why bands always break up. And they might get like a taste of the limelight, but then they never last long enough to be, To
your point, I think the mystique, the reputation that New York has sort of helps it along, because someone's more apt to listen to you if you got that New York tag, even especially with the hardcore thing. It's like, oh, those 4 letters, man, they carry weight with, the NYHC. You're automatically inclined to be like, oh, I'll give it a shot. Right, because
right. and you can't call yourself that if your band like totally sucks and has nothing to do with it. It's like a thing, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
The band broke up naturally, it seems, right, because of just like life and like people kind of figuring stuff out.
Yeah.
And we're gonna go a little longer than an hour, Joe, because
yeah.
So
I still have to do my Filipino accent for you, man. I don't when before I get to do that.
So I can't wait. So the band breaks up, and then like, do you just stop being in bands, or are there things that you did that we don't know about?
There probably is. Well, I think there was a rumor that, and I don't know how concrete it was, but I think Anthony Caminale or somebody had told George that Rest in Pieces was looking for like a second guitar for a bit. So I think that was like a rumor floating around after we had kind of like, we're just friends anymore, not bandmates. And George was like, his name was bandied about. Mike Wells Mike Wells is our bassist, went on to do like Joe Coffey with Paul Bearer from Sheer Terror. He and I did a quick like mid 90s band. We played a couple of shows at Coney Island High. That band was called Extra Dry. And I'm not really, that was like, we have no recordings. We just have a few live gigs and memories, really, of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then at what point So was it Black and Blue was when the band came back officially and started doing reunions?
Yeah. One more thing on the extra dry thing though, in case this gets out to Luke. So I actually didn't feel like it wasn't. I didn't want to do it anymore because it was like this is kind of like this doesn't feel like anything. So Luke from Gorilla Biscuits
Right.
came in and filled in for me, and I think they did play one or two more shows with Luke on drums.
Oh, that's so funny. A little trivia there. Again, more incestuous stuff happening. But you basically hung it up until Outburst got back together, which is many years.
You want to know something? I actually, to keep my chops going, like in the late '90s, I auditioned for like this cover, a bar band, because I wanted to keep playing. So
Sure.
I saw an ad in the what's that music paper, the Long Island one, Island
Oh
Ear.
God. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. It's like Our Village Voice.
Yeah, and there was
Yeah.
a ad out for like a singer and a drummer wanted to do 80s and 90s rock and roll. So I answered
What a
the ad.
perfect person to do it. The guy that loves Van Halen.
Yeah, but also like played leeway like in his garage too.
That's hilarious.
So I did do that for like 6 months as just to keep my chops, keep playing.
What year was Black and Blue when you guys came back?
2012.
Okay, so that was like, okay, so when did you pick up on the fact that like mysteriously like there was like a new crop of like hardcore kids that were in their late teens to like late 20s, that for some reason found out about Outburst and
Yeah.
were like and into it, because that's the weirdest phenomenon that you have that no other New York hardcore bands have. Like young people that were not born back then think your band is cool today.
Dude, you make me feel super old, man.
I'm sorry, but no, but it's cool though. I think it's cool. I'm sure you think it's cool. But and we're going to talk about the compilation. I have my theory, but I want to hear sort of your take on that and why that happened.
So do you know Busky, Jonathan Busky?
Yeah, well, yes.
Terror,
Maximum Penalty.
Maximum Penalty, right?
Yeah.
Busky actually worked for a while in the same music building as George, so they were like building neighbors. And he would tell George like, "Hey, man, I don't know if you know this, but there's like this like sick underground movement, especially like in Long Island, of like all these kids because of the internet and like file sharing, and also there was a little subculture about like the way we looked on our album cover."
Yep, that's where I was gonna go. But keep going.
The graffiti logo, because JR was our resident graffiti guy, but he did a pretty dope logo. So people were jocking that angle, the graffiti angle. And then I'm like wearing a Def Jam, like the whole cover. Like if you look at the clowns on this, right?
Right, I have it right in front of me as well. I mean, we're both holding it up, but
Yeah.
here I'll do it. So you see the outfits.
Yeah, we look
outfits. And you see this, and I'm sure I don't want to make you feel old, but you guys look like people right now. I'm sure this is what kids look like today.
Yeah. And so, look, there's no like uniform dress code. We look like a haphazard bunch of misfits because we didn't care what we look like, right? What do you care? You're listening to music. You're not looking at the way we do.
This literally looks like kids hanging out right now in Williamsburg.
Yeah, it takes all kinds. So that there was a whole message board. I think there was I forget the name of the message board, but they would always go on and rag on us for looking like Guidos or a boy band, and it took like a life of its own. So Busky says, to me and George, like, you guys should play this Black and Blue because there's a bunch of kids who would just jump at the chance to see you, because they'd never seen you before because, like you said, they were too young to go to shows when we were around.
Right.
So yeah, that all fed into like the pop culture aspect. But then I guess the music was also still a big thing because you could go on YouTube and find like bands covering Hard Way or When Things Go Wrong, even back then. So yeah. I guess there was kind of like it all kind of like came into play that, all right, let's do it. And actually, Vitala from Backtrack.
I was gonna go there because when you said there's a subculture of hardcore kids in Long Island, I was gonna reference backtrack, and I know Vitalo ended up
Yeah.
singing for you guys briefly. He's a great guy.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
wound up pinch hitting because Brian couldn't make it, which was another story. Like, you know, like, oh, we get this big shot to do Black and Blue Ball with Rancid, but our singer can't do it. But for the kids that didn't see Brian because they were too young, they get to see Vitalo, who they know.
Dude, that was so wild. We won't have to get into the drama of that, but there is a video of you guys with Cousin Joe. Shout out to Cousin Joe on Black and Blue Radio talking about that. And
yeah.
Like, I could only imagine, because I've been there with like frustrating bandmates, and I actually feel even weird saying that. Everyone has shit going on in their lives. It doesn't always work out. I'm not talking shit, but where you have this like big shot, and to you, you're like, we're about to play with fucking Rancid at the Ritz at Webster Hall. Like, please tell me this is not happening to me right now where I can't fucking do it. So then you just had to figure it out.
I'm gonna say, because you've been in bands, you know that. I think that's like the whole. It's the mark. It's like the mark of like, you've been through it. Like, I know what you're talking about because I've been through it. If you were on the outside looking in, you wouldn't know what it's like. But
it's like being asked. Well, it's like asking to. It's like being a basketball player and being asked to like fucking get a shot playing in like, you know, the major leagues, but then like fucking something is preventing you from doing it. And
always,
you're like,
always something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Vitalo did a great job. He flew in from like the Midwest and backtracked, like Ricky, Chris. Shouts to those guys because they put Vitalo on a. I think I want to say he drove. They put him in a car. They're like, you know what? We'll reschedule this Milwaukee date or something, and you go to New York and play with Outburst, and then right back. So backtrack is, you know, props to those guys. We tried to get you guys on, Ricky, if you're watching. We tried to get them on that comp because, you know, they're such cool guys, and
they're amazing. I was just talking to Ricky the other day. I remember those guys when they were really young because they're even younger than me, and so I used to run into them. They're great, and they pay homage. I think so. That era of hardcore in Long Island was like after my time, and I picked up on it because that was sort of like the next crop. And at that point, there were bands bringing it back to the OG sound, and Backtrack was one of those bands, stylistically, aesthetically, and they did a great job of it. And I think that that also was happening in other parts of the world and in the country, because you know, being somebody that works in music media and a nerd about that, I can say that like things get recycled every 20 years. And so I see that the late 80s, 90s fashion, graffiti, outfits, and all that stuff, which is exactly this, by the way. Graffiti, outfits, Adidas, you know, kind of like a hip hop punk thing going on.
Yeah,
Def Jam. That just fits in so well to this like next crop of kids. But then to like even like take it a step further, I think that well, I just said it already, but like, yeah, just the whole the presentation of it. So when did you really start to figure out that, like, because this is what I'm going to talk about here, Hot Shit Attitude, that you sent me, thank you very much. This has Power Trip, who not only covered your song but played it on House of Strombo, which is like a big show in Canada and on the internet for everyone to watch.
Yeah.
They made it part of their set.
Yeah.
Higher Power. They're
Yeah.
not even from America. Higher Power. I think they're from
UK.
They're from the UK, and then you know, Crime Watch, who are in New York, and Outskirts, who are in New York. And now the cool thing is, you know, there's males and females all covering your shit, and they're young. Like, so how does that even happen?
So okay, so it's between 2012 and then our next reunion show, which was 2017. In that time period, I go to Bill Wilson every time I see a YouTube cover of an Outburst song. I send it to him, and he's like, "Wild. Oh, that's wild. Oh," and then now we've got like 5 or 6 of them, and now like people like Tony Retman is sending me like, "Oh, he found Higher Power actually." He's like, "Look, these guys
are a great band."
Yeah. So now I've got like a handful of these things, and I'm talking to Bill about, like, you know, isn't that crazy how like all these kids who are like half our age are into this kind of thing and they're going into studios and like playing them. Power Trip played in a club in Brooklyn. Was it the Acheron?
No. I think it was it Acheron or was it? Yeah, it was Acheron probably.
And they did
before they got big, right?
Yeah. It was like a really small place, like in 2015, and they did the Outburst intro in their set. And so I hit him up on Instagram, Riley. I'm like, hey man, I'd love to come down with like Mike DeJean because they also did Breakdown's Jail of Depression in their set. So
insane.
I called DeJean. I'm like, hey man, it's like a Saturday night. I called up Mike Wells. I'm like, let's go see this band Power Trip and say hi to them. You know, like I heard they do songs in their set, and because it was on YouTube. But to go up and meet them, and they were like, it's funny. Like, do you know James from Justified Arrogance?
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah,
I love his posts. Yeah,
he's amazing. He was there too, and we met Riley and you know Nick and Chris and all the everybody, and they were like losing their minds. I'm like, we're losing our minds because you guys are just kids and playing songs we wrote when we were kids.
And they're from fucking Dallas, Texas, of all places.
Yeah, but they loved hardcore. They loved New York hardcore. You know, like Lee Wade. I think Riley was wearing an AF t-shirt when we met him, but that became like the beginning of a long-lasting friendship. Riley was like, "Oh, we'd love when we back to Bill Wilson." He's like, "We should do something with all these covers, you know, like maybe see if we can make like kind of I don't want to say tribute album, like a covers compilation, right?"
It's a tribute album.
No, if you see it in the store, someone would say that, but
let's just like point this out. By the way, like how many fucking hardcore bands in New York have an album like this that's like a tribute to them? Like you can't really. There's not even a Cro-Mags tribute album or an AF.
Yeah, there should be though. I'm gonna say that right now.
Yeah, I know, but isn't that nuts? Yeah,
it's nuts. And so, but that's props to Bill Wilson and Blackout. His vision, his creativity of like, why don't we see how many we can get? And that's how, we did some research on like, the girl Big Boss, she's from Ukraine. Misery, they're from San Diego. Fury, Southern California. So like, it's not just New York. And then they're not, like you said, they're not just all guys. The scene had become like friendly to like not just the boys club anymore. So
yeah.
Crime Watch, you had Outskirts, you had like Initiate.
Shout out to Kathy Coe from Queens, New York, man. She is a fucking ripper. She plays lead guitar in Outskirts. She's one of the best. I kind of grew up around her. She tore it up, man. She's amazing.
Kathy, because of Darren, I was able to tape myself playing the guitar solo because she's a huge Kirk Hammett fan, right, Kathy?
Yeah, she's so good. She plays all the Metallica stuff on Instagram.
I played all these Metallica riffs on my like shitty piano and would send them to Darren. Darren would send them to Kathy because he knew she loved. Hammett also, by the way, is part Filipino. Let's just put that out there.
Yeah, he is.
And so Kathy would be like, "Oh, he nailed it," because I don't play piano anymore, but I still fiddle around. And so I just thought it was a funny thing. But anyway, that's Outskirts. So just wanted to get that in there.
Yeah.
And the end result, Power Trip was one of the last ones to like sign on, and like they were already on Southern Lord Records, and like they were getting bigger and bigger. But Riley, man, bless his soul, he was like, he called me on the phone. He's like, let's work through this. Let's get it out. Let's get the I's crossed and the I's dotted and T's crossed because we really want to do this.
Yeah, thank God that happened.
Yeah, props to those guys, and they got that on Liquid Metal. Oh, serious? I forget what channel.
They treated it like a fucking like one of their own songs, which is so cool. Because now you live. That's so cool, man. Because your band was represented all over the world by young people. It doesn't get better than that when you think about it. Because it's like coming from a marketing angle, even though that's not what was going on. That's like there's nothing better than like a bunch of kids out there covering their music, and then people indirectly finding out what that is if they like it. And then a band like Power Trip sort of leading the charge as like the real fucking force of nature there, which is super cool.
Yeah, and that's why like when I heard about what happened to Riley last year, it was such a bummer because their future was so bright. Like they were already gonna. I think they were gonna headline if the pandemic didn't hit. They were gonna play a festival with Metallica or something.
I don't even know. Oh yeah, yeah. No, you're right. You're right. You're right. Because there was a bunch of festivals planned where Metallica was headlining every single one of them, and I know that they were at least on one of those shows. I think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Fucking A, man. Well, so rest in peace, Riley. I know we say that a lot, but it can't be said enough because he was great.
Yeah.
But so then Outburst, you ended up touring and doing shows in places that you never played. You toured Europe, right?
Yeah, that was so that the way that happened was Mike DeJean, who was playing bass for Cro-Mags JM, they had a tour lined up with Terror, Jesus Peace, and Death Before Dishonor. And for some, I think it was something to do with John. It couldn't, the logistics couldn't get done. So DeJean and Vogel from Terror are tight, and I think Vitalo had a big part in that too because he was managing Terror. He's like, what if you can get Outburst to open that tour and just do the big dates at the beginning? And so, we got to see how much time we had left at our jobs to take off.
To go try and tour Europe, right?
Yeah, right. It was great. It was funny telling my boss that, like, well, I got a chance to go to Europe, so I'm gonna waste all my vacation days in like late October if that's okay with you.
Right. Good timing, yeah.
Yeah. So we got to do 5 dates in Europe with Terror, Jesus Peace, and Death Before Dishonor. And that was something, like you said earlier in the show, like you're however many years it is later, you're playing places you've never played before. And that was a perfect example of it.
I think that's so crazy, for particularly to your story, because Outburst is, again, so unique in the fact that, like, I mean, we just kind of covered it, but like, now you're just like in Europe and you put out a demo and the fucking album, like, however many years ago. At this point, we're talking about like over 25 years ago. It's like close to 30 years ago or something.
And the compilation, the tribute album, had not yet been out, so that that was another thing that, like, well, what are you basing this on? Oh, we're basing it on Spotify because they have Miles to Go. They have the Where the Wild Things Are compilation and the demo. So, like you said, now word of mouth travels through streaming. So that's a big ally. That's a big plus to that kids in like Leipzig or Eindhoven knew the words to the songs,
Yeah, you guys benefited. I think also because you're not playing music for a living, like like a lot of bands are threatened by it and they're annoyed, and it's like, yo, you like, especially during the pandemic, but in a great way. Like, I feel like the legacy of your music has lived on and grown and you've benefited off of streaming and all that stuff. It's like, it's a great example of how that can really work.
Oh yeah.
Well for somebody. But so did you ever? We're gonna tie it up soon because I want to sort of like, but I want to talk about this stuff right here. Like, did you ever think about writing the music? Is that something that you ever miss from the old days? You ever talk about it, or is it like you want to just leave it alone? Some people, it's like you can really fuck it up if you try to, like, I'm gonna watch Coming to America 2 tonight, and I'm really afraid of watching that because it might be bad.
Good, 100%. Like, with something like a formula that works. I'm probably in your camp with that. Like, some people who, like, so we're legacy, right? Because you'll always hear the same songs. You'll always be them. Like when you're at a concert and they say this is a new song, and then everyone gets up and goes to the bathroom.
Yeah, they go get popcorn or something.
Yeah,
a soda.
That lets me. If I was on stage and I saw that, like, that would bum me out. But the other side of it is, you might be like, I might be Mike DeJean or George or Mike and say, yeah, I got this riff. I want to put it on a track and play it because I think it kills. And some other people might think it kills too. So there's that fine line you have to straddle. But as far as like anything written, no, because getting together to play these reunion shows and do tours was enough of an endeavor that we didn't have enough studio time to, like, hey, let's try and get this riff worked out. Mike DeJean is like, he breathes riffs.
He's a riff master. Yeah, I mean, that guy writes more music than most people. It just happens to be in many different projects.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. By the way, my cousin in Seattle says he saw Coming to America It wasn't so bad. It was cool.
I hope not. Yeah. Well, so what? There's probably stuff that you can't talk about that's coming up. But what is there anything Outburst related that you can talk about? And on the flip side, do you want to shout out a place where people can still buy merch, because that's a cool thing is people still want that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think so. It was announced yesterday because for anyone who doesn't know that New Direction is the new show by Walter on Van's Channel 66.
Yes, yeah, and you have an upcoming performance coming up
Right.
soon.
So he had Incendiary on the first show. He's got shows every 2 weeks, and then last night he had Mind Force on.
Amazing. Both bands were amazing.
Yeah, Mind Force is like, Jay is like such a he reminds me of not in his style, but he's got like an Eddie Leeway vibe about him.
Oh, big time. Are you kidding me? Come on now. I mean, and he does it great. I love that band, but like they're the best thing like Leeway since Leeway.
They're all like Leeway Jr.
Yeah.
So they played last night on New Direction, and then so we're scheduled. He announced us at the end of the show last night that we're going to be on March 18th is his next show on Van's Channel 66. And as the time comes closer, I guess it'll be on social media. Walter will promote it. But we did a short set. We're going to do a short set there. And, if you've seen Walter's show, it's kind of like he flies by the cuff. And
Yeah. No, it's going to be awesome. I love Walter is like the greatest fucking like guy that ties it all together for us, I think, because he's part of like every single genre. I was just talking about that with someone earlier today, how like Ian MacKaye in DC is like the tie that binds. And to me, and it's not, look, there's the OGs, right? And that's one thing, but because Walter spans genres and different things, he just is that guy for us, I think. That's cool.
Say a story about Walter really quickly that ties into the Van show? I want to say in 1989, we played the Start Today record release party.
No shit, really?
Gorilla Biscuits. It was like Gorilla Biscuits, Bad Trip, us, at CBGB's for Start Today record release. And so we went on right underneath them. George broke a string on his guitar. And then during our set. And so like Walter was like, oh, well, I'm getting ready to go on stage. So can you find another guitar? Like we're trying to fight. So it's no big deal. We're in the middle of a show. Let me get another. Keep that in mind. When we went off and Biscuits went on, Walter broke a string on his guitar.
Right.
And, oh, now look what happened. And we had gone to San Marcos to get pizza. So
dude, that was I just gotta say that was like the total part of the thing. Like you go to CB's, you pay, you watch a band, and you get pizza and come back.
Yeah, and hope to make it back before the next band went on, right?
Right.
Walter grabbed, because we were all friends, right? So he grabbed George's guitar and played the rest of the set with it. And there are pictures of it. But when George walked in, after our pizza, he saw Walter playing his guitar, and he was like, he was like really, really annoyed about that. He's like, what the hell, man? What'd you do? I asked you to borrow your guitar. It was a whole big thing that when you're like 19 years old, you're like, it's the most important thing to you. And
right.
That was just like a thing with the memory, because we were all supposed to go out to eat after that. But then this whole argument like happened.
Right, it turned into like beef for a second. Right.
But then they hugged it out. Walter said he was sorry, and George like, I understand. He took his apology, and that was it. We remember that, right? Like that's the things you remember. And like in 2005, like I went to Siv's tattoo parlor to get a tattoo, and we were sitting in the chair. He was talking about, it's like, Siv was like, do you remember that? Man, we didn't even know what we were fighting about. Like we could have just like ironed that out. Like, hey man, I'm sorry. I'll put you on a show. When you're young,
No, totally. And that's the funny thing about like the New York scene is also full of a lot of like just like tempers that would flare, I think, more than others. Like I watch like fucking the Salad Days Washington DC hardcore documentary, and even though I loved those bands, it was so boring because there was no beef and no fighting, no drugs, like nothing. Yeah. And I'm like, yo, this is boring as fuck.
So, fast forward to Sunday, we're doing the set for the Van show, and brings in his SG, and presents it to George as like, to bring it full circle, like, now borrow my guitar, right? So I thought that was kind of like a fitting end to the whole thing.
That is so funny, man. My phone just crapped out on me. I'm glad that I came back. I just got worried.
Oh, okay.
If anybody is watching this and they want to buy Outburst merchandise or vinyl or anything like that, where can they go buy it?
So the official merchandise place is, and I think everybody knows Cold Cuts merch.
Okay.
They got a pretty extensive website. You can still get the classic logo tee. There's a couple of like long sleeve tees and hoodies there with differing logos on coldcutsmerch.com.
Coldcutsmerch.com, and you can buy all the stuff there. And then everyone tune into the Van 66 channel, New Direction show, 2 Thursdays from now. So that's going to be awesome, and you guys are performing. And yeah, man, I hope that after this bullshit ends that we see you guys live again, because that'd be fucking awesome. I would love that. And then you and I could probably hang out finally, man.
Well, to see anybody live, right? Like to see any band in a club, that would be like awesome.
Yes, and I want to say this thing too. I know your Instagram is private, and I'm not going to try to convince you to not make it private if you want to keep your private life. But your shit, your stories and the shit that you post is some of the funniest shit that I ever seen on the internet, and I look forward to it all the time. So anyone out there that follows you, I think that is very lucky for the entertainment that you provide. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks. It's like a silly hobby just to see who will laugh at this and who will think like that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen, you know?
Love it, man. Well, this has been great, dude. Am I missing anything? Is there anything we want to shout out before we go?
I just wanted to know if for my sister-in-law who's out there and my wife who's looking for Filipino vegan recipes that you've done and posted, can they just go on your website, on your Instagram, get those for recipes, or can I hit you up or something?
You can hit me up. They could go to my Instagram and they could DM me because I'm posting shit all the time. There's also, this is so weird, there's a Filipino vegan Instagram with a chef with the same last name as mine, and it's Astig Enriquez. At Astig. Oh wait, hold on. Let me look it up so I could just tell everybody in case anybody is interested in this. Oh, it's Astig Vegan. At Astig Vegan. ASTIG Vegan. And the woman's name is RG Enriquez Diaz. Very Filipino. And
yes.
She's got a YouTube channel. I'm gonna shout her out. She posts a lot of cool shit. But
awesome.
but you can hit me up for my stuff too, man. I'm all about it.
Yeah, no, I see that you did Dinuguan like a couple of weeks ago, right?
Dinuguan, I do. I'm actually about to make my vegan adobo in a second, and that's what's going on here. But I love trying to recreate and reinvent stuff. We got a good culture, you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. So I just do you do a Filipino accent or do you not dabble in that?
I do. Yeah, I do.
So, who should go first? Do I go first? You want to go first?
You go first. I can speak and I can understand the entire language, but I have a hard time talking back.
Oh wow. I can understand it, but if you try to get me to speak to you and anything, I would sound like such a fool. Because I'm too Americanized. But for anybody who's interested out there in learning how to do a Filipino accent, there's a couple of things. You have to turn all the P's into F's and F's into P's. Your B's become V's and vice versa. And then your I's become long E's. Knows Andy Kaufman's character Latka Gravis in Taxi. You have to use that dictation, that tone, but bring it down into your regular voice. So he would be like, "Thank you very much," but then you bring it down to the regular voice like this and say like, "Oh, can you see my Eddie Van Halen poster in the back of my room? That's my favorite guitarist. He is fucking awesome." How is that? Was that good?
It was good. Or like you said, with the P's and the F's, if you want to, we always want to know if someone else is Filipino, but you replace the F's with the P's. So you go, are you Filipino? Are you Filipino?
What do you think I am, fucking with you or something?
There's a great comedian on Netflix who tries to who does a lot of Filipino accents, because I'm trying to look him up right now. But do you know who I'm talking about?
I think I do, because I think his name is Joe Coy.
His name's Joe Coy. He's half Filipino, but he's
Yeah.
like on the mission to kind of like expose our culture to the world through comedy. And he does a lot of imitations of his relatives, specifically his mother. And it's fucking hilarious. And even if you're not Filipino, it's still funny. Like,
Yeah.
he makes it relatable.
I'll tell you a little quick funny story. I know we're closing up, but my wife loves Joe Coy. And I'm not going to say I'm a hater, but like I see his routine is sort of like, if you're Filipino, you already know what's coming, right?
Right.
He'll call himself Josep like a bunch of times. So
Right.
he was playing out in Long Island at forget the place.
Like
And
Mulcahy's or something, or the Space, or Paramount maybe.
Paramount. It was Paramount. And so she's like, for Valentine's Day, can you take me to Joe Coy? Like, that'd be perfect. I would love that. I'm like, yeah, but like, what's in it for me? So like, we made a handshake deal that if I take you to Joe Coy, no questions asked, later that year when Hootie and the Blowfish come to Madison Square Garden, you have to come with me, because she hates that like 90s white rock.
Oh my God.
So we had a perfect deal, because I sat through Joe Coy with her, and then she later that year sat through Hootie and the Blowfish and Bare Naked Ladies with me. So thanks, Joe Coy.
Your music taste is amazing to me, because we've talked about Van Hagar, and now we've talked about Hootie and the Blowfish and Bare Naked Ladies. Yo, respect, man, respect.
Oh yeah. I
love it.
If, you know,
Dude,
it sounds good. I was gonna say, if you like it, it sounds good. There's no shame. It should be no shame in your game. You know, I like it, and I like it. You know,
I don't believe in guilty pleasures. If it's good, it's good. You know what I mean?
100%.
Yo, this entire interview is going to be living on the St. Vitus Instagram channel, and if you go on YouTube and look me up, Chris Enriquez, there's over 215 episodes on there right now, and it's always awesome when the guests are people from New York, from our scene, because this is a New York club, and that's what we always try to give respect to, because even though we have people from outside places in other countries, at the heart of it, St. Vitus is a result of people that grew up going to CB's, Wetlands, Coney Island High, trying to carry the tradition, and it's because of people like you and your friends that were in bands that we exist doing what we do. So thank you so much for your contributions to it, man.
Thank you right back for hosting this platform during the pandemic. People get to see guests of all sorts of different musical backgrounds, and just talk about stuff that maybe fans or listeners like would wonder about, but you ask the questions and you speak it into existence, or get us to talk about stuff like that. So thank you for that as well.
Absolutely, man. Well, I will talk to you soon. I want to get this up on the platform before my phone dies, because for some reason my charger isn't working. But this has been amazing, Joe, and I can't wait to do this in person one day, man.
Chris, man, the hollow's on me next time we meet.
Sick. Peace out, brother.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too.